Well, because I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole. So hold tight, because we're going to go to a world that you might not know. But we begin easy. I think you all agree, when you look at the image behind me, that these are mountains. There's a bunch of rocks, snow, ice, and that's it. Is it? So I would like to ask you, how many of you also see something more there? Maybe a spirit or a mountain god, a force? Is there anybody who sees more than just a bunch of rocks there? Wow. Okay, most of you don't, and that's okay. At the end of my talk, we'll see if we have to regret that or not, that the majority doesn't see a spirit or a god there. I'm an explorer, and on the next picture you will see me in my desert outfit. I'm a biologist also, and about 25 years ago, I quit my job after a long hesitation, I must say. It was a very good job. I bought 3 camels, and I started to explore the desert. And that was in a time before the GPS, before satellite telephones. And I tell you that the desert, where I'm going to take you right now for a brief moment, imagine you're me. You don't know much about camels. You were never a scout. You never owned anything more than a cat. And all of a sudden, you have 3 camels, a silly compass, and a map that's basically blank. So this beautiful picture that you see is terrifying when you stand there and you know you have to survive. And in order to survive, you have to navigate pretty well, but you really have to get to know the desert. And I mean, intimately, because if you make a mistake, it might be your last one. So the desert was never a problem for me. I loved it, but I knew it's a force I have to reckon with. It's stronger than I am, so I really have to do my best. And while I was walking there with my camels and really trying to figure out where to go and what all these details meant, I got to know the desert as, you might say, a lover almost. And I noticed the desert had mood swings. It had a character, a personality. There were places where I got the shivers, and I didn't know why, but I was scared all of a sudden. And other places where I started to just sing from joy or cry even, because things were so beautiful. And the desert really changed my personality. But what it didn't change was my worldview. The way that I was taught the world was run, science was all important. And so science told me there are no spirits, there is no God, at least not in nature, and what you don't see doesn't exist. So the world as an object. And when I went to Siberia about 8 years ago, and that was after maybe 15 or 17 years of desert exploration, so I'm really a desert rat. And then I went to Siberia, completely different, which was what I really wanted. And I went to a place where you see an orange square, Altai Mountains, and it's right in the heart of Eurasia. It's where 4 countries meet. Incredibly beautiful. So that was not the point, but the shock for me was that people there really believe that there are spirits and that the earth is alive. And the earth has organs. There is a fontanelle, an umbilical cord, the earth has lungs, and people communicate with the mountains, the trees, the water. And they told me, you can't pick a flower. If you need it, okay. If you don't need it, don't do that because you will anger the spirits. Even rocks, you do not pick them up just for pleasure. You leave them be. And in the beginning, I found it amusing and interesting. But then I came back and again, and I thought, are you really kidding me? Do you want me to believe in spirits? I'm a biologist. Spirits don't exist. And shamans, I met a lot of shamans. These are people that can travel between the upper world and the underworld, and they communicate with spirits, so they say. But I also saw something else, which was tourists coming there, and I thought, well, they just play this trick to get some money, and probably they don't even believe it themselves. Until I started to travel with local people. And you see two herders here, incredibly tough guys. They fight wolves. They can stand, minus 30 degrees Celsius. They know about a hard life. And even these guys told me, when we were there, you see a grave of a Turkish warrior who died hundreds of years ago. And they said, Arita, don't sleep there, because at night spirits will wander around and you will have very bad dreams. And also, after dark, they told me, shh, quiet, not too loud. You will anger the spirits of the river. Don't get water there. And so I thought they really see the world very differently from the way that I see it. How is that possible in this time and age? And I would compare it with, if we look at Earth, from, say, if we are in space, you see this planet, and you see the ocean, and you see the continents, but we actually see more than just that. We put, at least in our part of the world, we put a grid on the Earth. It has longitude lines, latitude, South Pole, North Pole, equator, and you probably don't say that that is nonsense, but we made it up. And next, we thought that that is our reality, whereas the people in another culture have their own grid, of spirits or whatever it is, and they think that that is real. So then I said to myself, who is right and who is wrong? And it made me realize that actually, I say my ideas are shaped by language, science, culture, maps. And to give you an example, in the Altai Mountains in Siberia, where I traveled, people have 20 different words for an aspect of the soul. Whereas we, as far as I know, have only one word, which is soul. And if I ask you what it is, I get 100 different opinions. So then I thought language actually and maps are also a kind of a prison. I mean, in one way you can communicate, but in another way, if our language doesn't have a word for something, then it doesn't exist. So, because we don't have all these words for spirits and souls that these people have, we think that it doesn't exist, whereas they think that I'm, not completely 100%, because can't you see these spirits? And actually, the herders, they took me to a sacred valley and a sacred mountain, and they told me about it, and I thought, what's sacred about that mountain? And they said, you can't even look at it, it's forbidden. So I sat in front of that mountain, the most sacred and highest mountain of Siberia, and I sat there for hours, and I said to the mountain, show me you're special. What is so sacred here? And of course, nothing happened. And then I went to that sacred valley where people really sense power, and I stood there, and I was the only one who didn't feel anything. And so I really started to doubt myself. But then when I realized that maybe my culture and my upbringing are part of my belief system, there started to be a crack in the wall, so to say. And I want to ask you, when you see this picture here, our modern map makers want us to believe that there's no blank spot on the map anymore, to my really regret, because I love blank spots on the map, because they leave space for monsters and unicorns and paradise. And we pushed it all off the map. But honestly, if you look at this scene here, and I would show you a map of that same area, a topographical map, and you could see the lines that represent a mountain and a lake and whatever. Do you know that place, really? Yes, you can go from A to B, but do you know the taste of the water there? Can you hear the messages carried by the wind? Do you feel, a sense of awe when you stand in the desert or here in front of those mountains and you are alone, like I was, and you have to cross them and you don't know exactly if you will manage, and you have this feeling that there's a force stronger than you are? No, we don't. And maybe you think, well, okay, but that's irrelevant for the map. The map is a way to go from A to B. So why should I know how the water tastes or what you feel there? It's irrelevant. It's your personal experience or opinion, but we don't need that layer on the map. I disagree. Why? Because we live in a very exciting time, and the developments are going so fast, and the world changes so fast, most of us cannot catch up or comprehend where we will be in 10 years' time. So the people who are at the front of all these developments, say the whiz kids from Silicon Valley, scientists, some of the people here also in the audience, they have a sense where it might go, and they are the ones to decide where in 10 years' time we will live, or in what kind of world we will live. And so in a way, they are our modern map makers. They navigate us into the unknown. And they are the ones to decide, whether they know it or not, what that world will look like. So do you want to trust these people who are crazy about science or crazy about innovations and will do things just for the sake of doing it? Do you trust them to make the right decision between what is possible and what is desirable, between making profit or doing something for our well-being? I think, in a way, we have to trust them, but what they need is a moral compass. They need a gut feeling. They need to be connected with us, who are behind, and with the earth. And to do so, I would suggest the following. I have some ideas about it. Let me see if this thing wants to cooperate. Yes. First of all, I want to revise our maps, which means I want to change them a little bit. I want to add the human connection, with which I mean a sense of place, a sense of connection, because what I didn't tell you, what happened in the desert, is that when you are emotionally related to a place, like for me, if you say desert, I see immediately, I see places in front of me, I see camels, and I care. And still, after all these years, I deeply care about the desert and also about the places in Siberia where I went. So I would suggest that it's important for us as a society, but also for scientists, to connect again with the place where you come from, to connect with the earth. And to do so, we need to add, we need to develop a sense of place, and that means that space, is kind of neutral, but that's not enough. Space plus meaning means you have a sense of place. And that is important, and it means actually that the topography of your mind meets the topography of the landscape, and something happens in between. And I want to explain you this with maps. Here you see a map of a place I showed you earlier, this mountain, Beluga. You see it, it's where the 4 countries meet. There's this holy mountain, and I did a huge expedition. I danced around the mountains for 4 months to find paradise, actually, but that's another story. But when you see this map, you're not upset, right? You know these kind of maps. So the river is a blue line and all of that. Now I show you another map of the same mountain. You see top left, Beluga Mountain, but this is a mythological map. And you may say, that's fantasy or a fairy tale, doesn't exist. But I tell you, there are a lot of people who think that paradise, Shambhala, exists. It's a hidden valley surrounded by icy peaks, and this mountain Beluga is somewhere close. That's why I started to search for paradise there, because I thought, let me go and find it. So if you can deal with this map, then hold on to your chairs, because I want to know if you can deal with the next one. That is the same mountain, Mountain Beluga, up, down, and you see a dark figure, which is Erlik, the god of the underworld, and then you have 8 spheres of heaven. Top is the polar star, and then you have positive energy, negative energy. Together they create the earth, and all these layers of spheres of heaven have their own gods. In some layers, souls are being born, others have other particularities. The point is, we don't think this is reality. For people there, this is very true. For them, this is more real than a mountain of just rocks and ice. And does it matter which map you believe? Yes, I think so. Because if you use a map that only shows you a topography, but not the meaning of a place, you can just divert rivers, or you can say, oh, there's gold in that mountain, let's take it. You know, it doesn't mean much. But when you put your soul in a place, like people in the Altai do, and you have rules and taboos because you don't want to anger the spirits, you act differently. So I'm not saying that you have to believe what these people believe. I'm just saying that you might at least want to understand it and see the implications of how we see the world and how these people see the world. And when you add meaning to a place, it means that you bring offerings, that you respect your environment. And also, I think, you know, in this time and age, we are about to make a huge leap forward. Actually, it's happening already. And to be able to make that leap, you need to touch base first. You need a platform to jump from. And that platform, to me, is where we are from and is also our society. So now I want to take you back to the first image of that mountain. And I asked the same question that I asked you, what does this mountain mean, to a guy there in the Altai Mountains. And I said, I just see mountains there. What do you see? He said, I am those mountains. Those mountains are me. And he said, you may not believe it, and that's okay. For you, it's just beautiful, but it's a cold kind of beauty. He said, because I believe that this mountain gets information from the cosmos, and I can sense that information, I feel empowered. And in return, I empower this mountain by bringing offerings to the mountain. I energize this mountain, and I get something back from that. So I would say, let us celebrate diversity of thought and not put a monoculture of thought onto other cultures. And I think if we manage to do that, if we just leave some blank spots on the map, to leave some myths and dreams and the miraculous there, we might come a long way. And I would say, ladies and gentlemen, that if we can manage that, to add the miraculous in our maps, that is what I would call true enlightenment. Thank you very much.